Hi everybody, if you don't already know me, I'm Chris Woodman and you're watching Mystery Made Known, a video channel about all things Jesus and the Gospel. Today's video is my testimony, my story, how one day I encountered Jesus, a day that was to change my life forever. My background is similar to many of my age, the end of the boomer generation, born in the early 60s, raised in a secular society, but with established Christian input. For instance, regular Christian assemblies at school, both primary school and secondary school, including traditional nativity plays every Christmas. Christian input in the Cub Scouts and in the Air Training Corps. My mum and dad also regularly took me to church, where I progressed through the various milestones in the church traditions: christening, Holy Communion, then eventually confirmation. But at the age of 13, my dad gave me the freedom to choose whether or not to continue to attend church or not. And my choice was a passionate no thanks, Sunday mornings off please. And this ended my regular relationship with conventional Christian church life. Despite my rejection of conventional Christian church life, I maintained a sense of a notion of the possibility of the existence of God. During my late teens and early 20s, I developed a sort of general anxiety about death and tragedy among me and my loved ones, and just in general. And with it came a measure of what I now know to be obsessive compulsive disorder in my behaviour. I found that the only thing of my former religious experience that was of any use to me was praying for safety, both for myself and for the ones I loved. But as I grew older, the anxiety backed off as life opened up for me. In terms of religion, I settled into a sort of passive agnostic, maybe God exists sort of category. Although funny enough, I would be in the there is a God corner in arguments with atheists, but in the atheists corner in arguments with Christians. So we come to the end of the 1980s. I had my dream bachelor country cottage, I had a nice car and a dream and very well paid job. I was young, free and single. In the summer of that 1989, I was returning home from holiday and breaking this over 700-mile drive home for the night at a friend's place halfway. I also discovered another friend and his wife were in town and would like to meet up. They suggested meeting up Sunday morning in the church that they were both married in only a few months earlier. Well, I reluctantly agreed and so found myself in a church service on the morning of the 16th of July 1989. I had no idea about what I was just about to experience, an experience that changed my life forever. Well, the service began with a hymn, and I engaged in that amazing human ability that we all have to do one thing and have your mind on something completely different. As I sang along, I scanned around, checking out the congregation, and in my thoughts began answering questions like, who is this Jesus? Why do these people bother to do this? What is this really all about? Or is this just a waste of time? Are these people just weak and need some sort of religious crutch to get through life with? Are they just slaves to a historic tradition? And questions like that. Well, when the song finished, I had the strangest sense that I'd just been interrogated. It was as if I hadn't asked the questions at all. It was as if something or somebody else had done the asking. And as a result, My whole attitude towards Jesus, church, Christianity had all been laid bare and exposed in my mind. Well, a prayer followed and all heads bowed down and I instinctively joined in. Well, suddenly, what can only be described as a vision appeared in my mind. I was looking at the front of a small cottage similar to my bachelor pad. The extremities of the picture, the top, the bottom and left and right, they weren't clear. But what I was looking at was a whitewashed outside stone wall with 2 windows, one either side of a front door. Up against the front door was heaped unused wooden furniture, all covered in cobwebs and dust. A grandfather clock, chest of drawers, chairs and stuff like that. As I looked, I wondered what was going on, and somehow answers were immediately provided in my mind. What I was looking at represented part of my life. I took little notice of it. I'd sort of just turned around and saw it for the first time. As I stood looking at the windows and into the house, I was astonished to see a beautiful sunny sky where I should have seen the dark inside of the house. I was confused. I thought, am I on the outside or inside? What's going on here? I quickly checked the wall, front door, with the front door step in front of it, with all this stuff heaped on it. I was definitely on the outside, or was I? What was going on? Well, the windows were close enough to the front door for somebody to sort of stand behind the front door and lean into view through either of the windows. And as I looked, a figure, obviously standing behind the door, slowly leaned into view, first one window and then the other window. The figure was shrouded in a dazzling white robe with an intense luminescence highlighting prominent features, especially the hair, the face with the cheekbones and the forehead and the chin and the eyes. Oh, the eyes. They stared right at me and seemed to sort of pierce into me. They weren't aggressive in any way, just sort of powerful and disarming, a sort of penetrating, all-knowing look. As I wondered who this was, the answer came, and I've realised since that this was nothing less than a vision of the risen Jesus. His glances through the windows represented the glimpses that I had had of him throughout my life so far up to that point. Moments when he'd managed to get through to me. Moments as a child maybe, when I glanced questioningly around me in the church with all of its statues and stained glass and ritual and icons. Or when people had told me about Jesus and I'd sort of debated with them. Or glimpses when I'd simply sat on my surfboard on a warm summer's evening with my friends, watching an amazing sunset and just thinking to myself, there must be a God. A quick glance at the heaped furniture explained that they represented the things in my life, the attitudes, the actions, the lifestyle that I had put between me and him. Sin. Finally, I heard the slow but deliberate knocking on the other side of the door. Well, it must have only been a couple of minutes at the most, but the prayer finished and the vision was gone. I looked around expecting all eyes to be on me, wondering if this was a weird cult with some hypnotising deal going on. But no, everybody was carrying on as if nothing had happened. Nobody noticed anything special happening to me at all. Well, I endured the rest of the service completely distracted by what had happened. The Lord's Supper then eventually came towards the end of the service, communion or Eucharist as it's sometimes called. And I refused participation and let the things pass me by, suddenly feeling that these people actually did have the real deal and I was some sort of spiritually unclean blight tainting their meeting. Without any provocation, I became aware of the dark side of my life, and I just wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. Well, eventually, final prayer was offered by the minister, during which I could hear in my head this loud banging on the door and a voice, curiously my own voice, calling out, "Let me in, let me in." Anyway, the service ended. My friend and his wife spotted me across the church. They came over, stopped short, and my friend looked me up and down and said, "Chris, what's the matter? What's wrong?" Well, I couldn't answer him as I was holding in the tears. You see, I'd made it from the seat or the pew to the wall and was leaning up against it for support, shaking. Well, I eventually calmed down and we headed off to spend the rest of the day together as we'd planned. But all day I was distracted with trying to explain away what I'd experienced, but intuitively knowing all the time, full well, that I'd never known anything like it before. That evening, I was invited to stay at my friend's in-laws' house for the night. They returned from the evening service in the same church, only to say that for no apparent reason, the minister had turned to them after the service that evening and said that he strongly sensed that God was speaking to somebody in particular in the congregation that morning. Well, all I can say is something happened at that moment. I just sort of woke up to the reality of Jesus and the gospel being the real deal. Actual reality. I believed it. It was like going from black and white to technicolor. Well, the process continued the next day on my long drive home. An incredible sense of God's loving presence. And a final postscript to the story is that about a year later, I learned that my brother had, at the time, been praying specifically for Jesus to knock on my door a little louder. Well, I've sensed his presence to varying degrees of intensity ever since, and have many accounts of his power at work in and around me and in and around the lives of others. I can't claim to understand everything about it all, but I've learnt much along the way, and I still see I have much more to learn. I simply believed, turning away from a life that says no to Jesus and joyfully pursued a life that says yes. The early church disciples, after Jesus' resurrection and ascension to heaven, they were told to stop talking about him, to stop testifying, to stop proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ. And in answer, they simply said, "As for us, we cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard." And elsewhere in the Bible, it says to believers, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope that you have. So there you have it. That is why I say what I say, do what I do, and live how I live. I pray that you too will wake up to the reality of the intense love that your Creator has for you. God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I pray that you will receive the life He purchased at great cost for you to take up and live out. I pray that you will have your own story, your own account of the reality of Jesus. I pray that you too will be able to testify about Jesus.